Hello, everyone. I am Julianne Meyer. You are watching Own Your Wellness, and I'm excited to bring back a guest who now has a slightly different last name because she, like myself, recently got married. And let's just bring her onto the stage. Melissa Dileo, welcome back to Own Your Wellness. So happy to
Hello,
have you.
Julianne. Thank you for having me again. I was so excited when you reached out.
Yeah, me too. We hit it off in person and we hit it off on screen. And I just always appreciate every conversation that I have with you. And therefore, I thought, since you have such this wealth of knowledge and you're a fun person, you're the perfect person to bring back. So, welcome again.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. But for those that don't know who you are, or maybe need a little bit of a refresher, I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself.
All right. It's been a long journey to get to this place. I've always been in health and wellness, starting as a high school aerobics instructor. And then I had a short stint as a doctor of chiropractic. And that led to 17 years in pharmaceutical sales. So I know a little bit of an interesting story there. And then ultimately I became a national board certified health and wellness coach. And as they say, when you get into coaching, it's like, what do you want to specialize in? And it can take a while to get there. And I'm sure you can understand that. And I found that in coaching people around their health and well-being over the course of, many years, that one of the topics that kept coming up was people's inability to effectively speak to each other. Just normal conversations, whether it's in the workplace, and people are so concerned and they're just uncomfortable. They're very uncomfortable in having some very necessary conversations, and for various amounts of reasons. But I decided this is my own little internal study, that one of the top 3 reasons that people get burned out or struggle with their overall health and well-being is the inability to speak up.
I think that is a very valid point because we keep our issues in our tissues, as they say. And when we hold things in and hold things down, where is it going to go? So ultimately, we all want to feel seen and heard and appreciated. And if we don't feel those things, or we can't communicate our needs and wants in an effective way, how are we really going to be able to function at full capacity in the world? So I really appreciate everything that you do, because I think people underestimate the power of words.
They're very powerful. And unfortunately, some of the most powerful ones are the ones that we need to stop using and start putting some of our words into actual behaviors. For example, I hear this because I coach a lot in the workplace, and I'll hear people say, this person is entitled or selfish or lazy. And those are very powerful words that rarely lead to a conversation going in a positive way. Whereas if you were to take those labels and turn them into the observable behavior you're referring to, that makes, expand into sentences as opposed to a word, and you get much further faster.
And it doesn't feel like you're attacking a person as much as something that they're doing. So it's easier I know if I'm going to be on the receiving end, if somebody calls me entitled, which, I know I've acted that way in the past, but if anybody dares to call me that, it's on.
Right.
There's no solving anything. However, if they were to comment on my behavior, I can see that. Or I could be made aware of that and say, okay, well, that's not what I'm trying to put out in the universe.
Absolutely. And it helps people to understand how they are being experienced by others. And you're more open to it when you describe behavior than the label or the judgment or assumption that comes with it.
It's a lot easier, but I'm thinking, well, easier, but also harder, because you actually have to think a little bit longer. It's so much faster to say lazy.
Right. Yeah. It takes a little more effort however, it makes the person who's, coming up with the labels and such, it makes them do a little bit deeper dive. What is it specifically about this person's behavior that is having an impact on me? Yeah. What is it I really want to see them do different, either to start or stop doing something?
Exactly.
And it makes the person who's going to have the conversation or open it up be a little more clear on their end, because that's where we also get in trouble. We jump to this knee-jerk reaction instead of thinking about what is it I'm looking for in this conversation, what outcome, what result, and how do I best address it in line with what I want as an outcome.
I feel like good communication skills is definitely a leadership quality. And that doesn't mean you have to be the boss to be a leader.
Right.
But I used to work with this coach who used to always say, if you're not getting, the conversation isn't going where you want it to go, that's a leadership issue. And I thought that that was a really interesting way to look at it. But she's saying the same thing that you are, just not eloquently. You know, you put way more thought into this.
It helps that I teach the training on this. You know, I facilitate full training. What I find though is, and I'm sure you've found this too through taking training yourself, you do the training, you read the books, and there's a lot of information out there on how to have these conversations. This is not unique to me. What I have found though is, with the best of intentions, people walk away from reading the books, or you walk away from the book or the training. I've done this. So basically I'm my own best client. And you don't think to use it until you're in that situation. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, that's not how I learned. That's not what I meant to say. That didn't come out right. So my big passion around this topic now is the practice. Practice what you've learned when it doesn't count.
Yeah.
So you develop a muscle, much like working out, very much a, health thing. You work out, learning a foreign language.
Yes.
You practice it. You don't read a book and then you go to the country and you're fluent.
Well, that's the thing I think a lot of people tend to forget about, is the idea of practice, because there's Google. I mean, there's information up the wazoo everywhere. We are inundated with information. But what do we do with that information? It's like, I had this other coach, he was talking about how he was reading all these books about meditation. And he finally dawned on him, like, maybe I should actually meditate.
Right. It seems really beneficial.
Maybe it's not the same thing reading about it.
Yeah. Yes. It's in the acting on it.
Yeah.
Taking imperfect action.
Exactly. And, you bring up this really good point about doing it. And I wouldn't say necessarily that it doesn't matter, but not in the heat of the moment. Because when I worked in addiction recovery, we would teach people, and this is one that took me forever to figure out. Like, I don't know what my mental block was, but they have this thing where you're supposed to get a job or a commitment. That's what it's called, a commitment at a meeting, so that you go to the meetings. And I thought, well, that's lame. I'm just going to go. But the thing is you go when things are bad, but not when things are good. And then when things are bad, you're out of the habit of going. So that's the last thing you're going to do. But if you're already going, then it's much easier to keep going, and it actually helps you.
That is, yes, exactly that.
Yeah, exactly. Is this something that you find is, I feel, let me rephrase this before I even get the question out. With the generations being so different in the way they communicate nowadays, I don't know if it's always been like, it seems to me, it seems bigger, but it's probably because I'm older that it seems like these young kids today, But I'm wondering if there is a generational difference in the way that people are able to pick up what you're teaching.
That is a very interesting question. And I had not actually thought about that. So you kind of put me on the spot. When I think about it, I have a friend whose whole business, her coaching business, is about teaching to the generation. So I learned a little bit about them. So yes, I think that it is cross-generational, because a lot of the unnecessary conflicts or discomfort in conversations is often started with this preconceived notion based on your age, what generation you're part of how you are going to react or respond.
Yes.
I hear it all the time. I speak about not labeling people, and I know you've heard it, and I've probably been guilty of it at some point, but speaking to, oh, those Gen Zers, those young people, they're this. And I'll have a mixed group in my classes of all ages. And they're like, whoa, 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 wait a minute. Don't throw me in this bucket. I'm a fellow human being. And yes, the generation and the way I was brought up and my parents and what was going on in the world culturally and all these different factors play in. Absolutely. However, I'm not just one piece of this big group. I'm still an individual and I want to be treated as such. So I think as finding where even in cross-generational, there's a lot of common ground. We want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want someone to seek to understand. We want to be given the opportunity to give our perspective, if you will. And quite frankly, I think across the world, if we were to think about it, is at some point, you only need one person in conversation, go, whoa, 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 let's back up and see if we have common ground, regardless of that generation.
I think that is very accurate and well said. We're all humans. I mean, that it doesn't, but also I think that it doesn't, and this is just my opinion. I have no idea if this is true or not, but, yes, there's obviously going to be difference in the way people communicate generationally, but also within that generation and the others and all that. Everybody's a human, everybody's an individual. So, you're coming from your own perspective. So of course there's going to be differences. My husband sent me this meme. Oh, I guess it's not really a meme. It was a video clip and it was Ronald Reagan and Walter Mondale.
Wow. Okay.
And they were debating, and I can't remember who was doing the debate, but they asked Ronald Reagan saying, "You're the oldest president, blah, blah, blah. Do you think you could handle being, being able to handle this, whatever comes up?" And he goes, and his response was brilliant. And he said something to the effect of, "I'm not going to make this about age. I'm not going to bring up the fact that my opponent is young and inexperienced."
Oh, okay.
I just thought, whoa. And Walter Mondale actually laughed. And I just thought, wow, times have changed. But, and apparently he's like, that's when I knew I was going to lose the race, is when he said that. Because
interesting. That's a great story.
I thought it was fabulous. It was just so, it was brilliant. Way to turn the tables. It's all in how you look at things. And, I want to kind of go back to this idea of the difficult conversation because, as you know, I live in California, and in the land of where I live, nobody wants confrontation. It's to the point that it's annoying. Like if the movie's not working at the theater, nobody stands up to let anybody know.
Oh, wow.
They'll figure it out.
Somebody else will jump up and speak up.
Exactly.
Right?
So do you find that, because I've lived here for 10 years now, is that kind of common that people kind of shy away from confrontation, or is it just because they're afraid they're not going to be seen and heard?
I would say that there is this underlying relationship with feeling remotely uncomfortable in a situation. And if I'm going to stand up and speak up, I'm drawing attention to myself.
Yeah.
And someone may say something that makes me uncomfortable, or I might, get unsolicited feedback on the fact that I'm speaking up, and it's going to make me uncomfortable. You bring up a point, and I'm trying to work on this project, and the title of my project is "Conversations Are Not Uncomfortable, You Are." And speaking to that, it is not the conversation itself that is discomfort, it's our response and reaction and perception of it. And when we feel put on the spot, when the spotlight is on us, for many, many people, it's incredibly uncomfortable. And we don't want that attention. We seek attention when we can control where it comes from.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think about me too. I'm like, I want to be liked. I don't want to have you possibly not like me because of something I say. And even if it's something that needs to be said. I mean, fortunately, working in addiction recovery, I kind of got over that quite a bit because people just didn't like me because of the position I was in. So I got kind of used to it. It was like, all right, fine, don't.
May I ask you a question? May I ask you a question?
Of course.
When you say, I want to be liked, what does that mean to you? What are you really saying when you say, I just want people to like me?
I just want to be approved of. I want people to want to be in my presence. I want them to enjoy being around me. That's what it means to me to be liked.
Okay, thank you for it, because I hear that a lot, and I just like define what that means to you, like even being uncomfortable and all that, and being like, years ago, I had a client, and she worked at a school, and she was really upset that she found out one of the teachers at school did not like her,
Yeah.
and she was just. It really, really impacted her. Like, what's not to like? What did I do? What did I say? I don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And she, of course, found this information out from someone else, not from the person. And I asked her, I said, is this a woman that you would want to have lunch with, or would you invite her to your home or an event that you had? Do you enjoy casual conversation? Well, no, I don't really like her. And I go, it is interesting. And it was funny. I didn't even mean to set it up that way, but she just walked right into this. And it's, why do we need 100% approval of every being we come in contact with when we ourselves don't have this need to approve of everybody?
Exactly. It's a fascinating world. I mean, it's the human mind and how we deal with things and each other and ourselves. Ooh. So when you're teaching people about communications or communicating with others, I assume a lot of that comes down to as well how you're talking to yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's the thoughts running through your head before you engage in that conversation. You've had it anywhere from moments to days to years before you actually engage in that conversation. You've been playing both parts of it, quite frankly. And it's the thoughts. And then it's great when you expand on exponentially by going, I just want to get some other points of view. Let me talk to some other people. And then you get that phrase, I think it's common these days, the pile on. Oh, yeah, you're right. And so now it's not only your own thoughts racing through your head, it's the thoughts of other people. There's a lot of people involved in a conversation before you even have it.
Ooh, that is pure gold. That there is a soundbite. It's true. That the meditation person that I was talking about, one of the skills he taught me that I thought was really brilliant, and this was like self-coaching, and it was to put two chairs out and sit in one and be like the person, myself, complaining or about whatever, and then go sit in the other chair and answer like I'm a therapist or a friend or a stranger, somebody who's there to help, and then go back and you physically get up. It really works. It helps so much to get through the whole thing and let things go, because the trick is you have to pick somebody that's not that negative voice. What you would hope to hear. It really does work, though. To me, that was an amazing tool to receive from him, because it's changed a lot of things when I know I'm in my head and I know I'm just tripping out about something. I really have no idea what's actually going on.
And it takes off this experience of its own.
Exactly.
And not always, if at best loosely based in the reality. and we get trained. People train us. And I hear this a lot. Like I said, I do this a lot in workplace situations. And like this person, they come in and I give them feedback and they cry. Whether even when it's positive, their go-to, and I'm like, that's a habit.
Yeah.
Or they're going to scream at me, and nobody. And all these different things. So they're already going, I know I'm not going to follow through with this, because I've been trained by this person to just walk away or to let it have their way. And I find that I've experienced that a lot in my own life. So like I said, I am my best client, and just going, I'm just going to sit in this space, and I'm okay being uncomfortable for a while, because it changes that pattern of behavior.
I love that. I love that. On that note, we do need to go to a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to continue this conversation about sitting in the uncomfortable space and other ways. I know, it sounds like so much fun, right?
Exactly.
But it is needed, and just other ways that we can help ourselves learn how to communicate a little bit better. And I know that you're in the process of writing something about this too. So we're going to chat about that as soon as we come back.
All right.
Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us now, I am Julianne Meyer. You are watching Own Your Wellness, and today's amazing guest is Melissa Dileo. Welcome back to the show. So glad we're having this conversation because I know that there are so many people out there going, yeah, that's me. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of the practice, the actual practice of doing these things, because, you touched on that before in the beginning about like this idea of doing it when it's not heated, doing it when there's not like, when it matters. I hate to say it,
I know.
It doesn't matter, but there are points where it's more important to get it right. You really want to be able to communicate well, and in order to get better at doing that, you have to practice. So what does that look like?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, it is, for lack of a better word, the practice could be equated with creating a new habit. Okay. I like that. And as we know, habits are hard to start and to become a full-time habit, and they're very difficult to break. Mm-hmm. I would say the best way to start practicing is to step back and take a look at what are your less than desirable habits when it comes to communicating, especially when you're most invested in a certain result. So I say it doesn't matter. Hopefully you're having important conversations about that, but when you're most invested in a specific result.
Good. Yeah. Good distinction.
Maybe that's a better way to phrase it. Sitting back and going, so what are where do I get one of the most common ones is be aware of where you avoid discussing things that are a big issue that start out as perhaps a problem, a different point of view, or what have you. And because we hope that this person that we want to call their attention to something we wish they'd start or stop doing, or start or stop saying even, magically they'll get a wind of it. They'll just feel it in our presence, and they'll start or stop doing it without us ever having to say it. So one of those is being aware of what conversations do you avoid that inevitably escalate to an unnecessary conflict.
I like that so much, because there are patterns. And like you mentioned, the word habits, we have a habit of doing the same things over and over again. So finding ourselves in the same situations.
And to be clear, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no. Go ahead.
There are certain conversations that are worthy of being avoided. They're not necessary. They're not that, if you're not that invested. Yes.
Thank you. That's a really good point to bring up. And I'm going to give an example of something just for those that maybe are like, well, I don't know. I had the honor of interviewing the CEO and founder of Binge Network yesterday for the LA Tribune. And, she's a trailblazer in streaming television. And I asked her a question, and part of her answer was that, because in the world that I live in, with the streaming world, it's male dominated, like exceptionally male dominated. So for somebody like herself or myself that are higher up in the ranks, it's a little unusual because we're female. And one of the things that she said was that part of the way she deals with that is that she doesn't engage in those conversations, as in when a man is like, oh, that's so cute what you're doing, or she doesn't try to fight the fight of his opinion of her. She just lets him have his opinion and keeps on doing what she's got to do. There's no point. What's it actually going to do and solve? It's really not, except that maybe it might help her ego for a half a second. There's really no point in having that argument over and over again with each new person. So yeah, I like that you said that, because you don't have to have every single conversation, even if you feel comfortable being uncomfortable.
Right. You're like, oh, I'm just going to dig in. I'm going to, it's amazing how often we will dig into, we'll just like, I want to be right, but there's really no point to it.
I know I've been guilty of that. I'm yeah. And there's so many times now where I realize too, especially if I'm feeling heated about something, I choose not to say anything right then. That was something that I had to learn, because unless it's something that is like there's a time where it has to be taken care of in that exact moment, then I can wait. It can wait until I've cooled down and I'm thinking more clearly, because my thoughts aren't going to be in the same direction when I'm angry versus when I'm calm. So I don't want to make those choices, and you can't unsay something. That's the thing. You can say sorry, but that's not the same as not saying it in the first place.
Mm-hmm. You bring up an excellent point. So let's look at the things that might make you have that reaction. And I read a lot, and that's why I said, what I'm writing is not some new way to learn how to communicate. Mm-hmm. It's how do you practice what you've already learned? And so I read a lot of books and listen to a lot of podcasts and what have you, much like you do. And one of them I was interested in, and his book, Think Again, Adam Grant tells a story, but the story is in relation to what if we could be in a conversation where even if we had a strong opinion, we decided we are just going to listen mm-hmm. to understand theirs. We don't need to interject. We don't need to say where we agree or disagree. Simply going to listen. I'm not going to offer up opinions. I'm not going to offer up a solution. I am literally going to give my full attention to hearing what someone else is saying.
Oh, that's beautiful. Mm-hmm. If only the world would listen to that advice right around now. It's okay to not agree about everything. That's what makes it fascinating and interesting. Mm-hmm. You'll appreciate this. My husband's very, very good about this. I'm upset about something, and so I want to vent. And I'm complaining, and he'll say, "Hold on a second. Do you want me to listen mm-hmm. or do you want a solution?" And I'll tell him which one I want. Sometimes I want, just to complain. And other times I'm like, yeah, I want a solution. So, but he's smart. He's a mm-hmm. smart man. He asked me how I would like for him to listen.
And it's interesting that that's a very valid question, whether it's men are hardwired to fix things. Mm-hmm. And so for him to have the wherewithal to go, is that what you're looking for, is ideal. But even when it's you talking to a good female friend, sometimes it's best to, I have friends who have been venting about the same issue for 20 years. And years ago, I was like, let me ask you, you just want to vent? And I had to put up boundaries because I would get so emotionally attached to what they were venting about. And I'm like, that's not healthy for either of us. So I put up a boundary and I said, I'm happy to hear you, but in bite-sized pieces. And I'm going to ask you, and at one point I did say, I don't want to hear about this specific problem again unless you're ready to talk about what you're going to do about it.
I like that. I've done that myself because, like you, I'll get emotionally invested and then it'll seem like they're going to do something and then they don't. And then I'm upset because they're still upset and it's not even my life. Mm-hmm. Why do I care more about it than they do? I mean, because if they really cared, then they would make it's like the dog howling on the porch. When it hurts, enough, it will move. Otherwise,
exactly.
It's on that nail until hell freezes over. But I think that's, I like that idea of that kind of communication as well as saying, because personally, I don't want to hear the same problem for 20 years. I really don't. Like, do something or find somebody new to complain about this with, or, like you said, little tiny bite-sized doses is okay because I do want to hear about your life, but I don't really want to hear you complain and do nothing about it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's crazy. I like that. I like that so much. When you are working with, say, companies, for example, and in the workplace, do you notice that this is just kind of like a microcosm of just how people are in general? Is it a different environment so people communicate differently? Or I'm just curious. I have no idea.
Well, can you clarify what you mean by a microcosm of a group of people?
Well, I just mean like, is it kind of like it's the whole little world, all in itself, so it operates differently versus, it's kind of across the board. It just happens to be in the workplace.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. I just want to make sure how I was answering. I would say it could be both. It depends on the group of people. So I have done training programs with like the leadership of a certain organization. So everybody in the training is a leader, but of different departments. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found from spending a lot of time with them is it will come up. Some people will say, oh, well, this is also where I get it wrong when I'm talking with my kids or when I'm talking to people in my community, when we're at, our community meetings and what have you. I would say it's probably a mix. Some people are like that in every facet of their lives when they're around others. And other people will tell me, oh, I am much more assertive at home. It's at work.
Huh.
Sometimes it's about the position of the person they're communicating with. Well, if it's me speaking to a peer or one of my direct reports, I'm all in, I'm confident, I say what I mean. But if I see this person up here, either someone more important, more assertive, aggressive, having more clout, whatever this perception I have of somebody else, then I do change. So I would say it's a mix. There's not just a cut and dry way to answer that question.
No, and I think that's a perfect way to answer it because, one, you answered it. But it also gets me thinking about, how people show up in their lives and how some people, it's kind of like, this is who I am. And other people, I'm like, this is who I am here. This is who I am here.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of fascinating when you look at it as just how different people are in the world just in general, and how different that can be. And for me, it's always been like one of those things where I've never believed in leave it at the door, you're at work now, because I think that's virtually impossible. If somebody, because I've had people pass away while I'm at work, I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm going home, Don't tell me like I can grieve later. That's not going to happen. But to me, it's always been like, but there's a time and a place, like I might go into the bathroom, for example, for a 5-minute break and cry my eyes out, come back composed and be ready to, because it's not appropriate for me to lose my crap all day long. Do you find that, people, what would you say is something that you wish that more people would consider while communicating? Is there something like a general thing that you wish people were either aware of or had the skill set for, or just something you see repeatedly that's just like, oh, please let me help you?
This is something, and I will say this is something I have to practice myself, is seeing even the people that most push your buttons. They're just like you. They were a child once and they grew up in a home and they were impacted by education. And it's that whole where people's perspective comes from, and seeing them as a fellow human being. And this is not a new concept for me. I've done plenty of reading and listening about how we're fellow human beings. And ultimately we want to have a pleasant life and engage and interact with people and have a community. And however, when someone pushes our buttons, whether it's in their behavior, in their comments, in their words, in their thought process, in the way they share ideas and their opinions, all of a sudden they become an adversary as opposed to just another person.
Yeah. And
to start by looking at them as a fellow human being who's just trying to figure it out the same way you are.
For me, it's showing people that grace. I have to practice it. I'm not going to, especially if I'm driving, but, but, I always remember things like you don't know what anybody else is going through or where they're coming from or what just happened in their life. And I'm constantly surprised. And it's so interesting too, because I keep getting this lesson and I know, and it started when I was a teenager, but the latest one, and this is another version of it, was, I got married last June, and I remember saying to my husband, I'm like, I didn't see you cry. I was hoping you would cry. I didn't see that, that excited, like, oh my gosh, there she is, bride look. And he goes, I had it. I was like, nah, no, you didn't. I wasn't upset because it was such a beautiful day. But then I see pictures and video and he had it. I just didn't see it. Like I happened to maybe look away at that moment or maybe I just couldn't see it, like whatever. And it made me realize how much I miss and how much I think things are a certain way and they actually aren't. So it's really showed me that just because I think something about somebody does not make it true or even real, because he literally had the look that I was, wanted. I just didn't see it. And that happened when I was a teenager too. So yeah. So I learned that, early on, but it was a great reminder.
When you shared that with him in retrospect, what was his response?
He just thanked me. He thanked me for acknowledging that. Because here's the thing, like I was never mad at him in any way, shape, or form. So for those that are watching, I want to make that clear. Like, how dare you not look at me this way? And no, it wasn't like that. It was just like, I was hoping for this particular reaction that I didn't see. And he's like, no, I swear. I'm like, no, you didn't. And
don't lie to me.
He was like, oh, thank goodness. He started to doubt himself because I said that. He's like, but I felt it. I'm like, I know you did, babe. I know you did.
And was this your first conversation as a married couple?
Definitely not. But the nice thing too, is that, and he's really taught me too, there are ways to communicate where it doesn't have to escalate to a fight. You can get your point across and communicate uncomfortable, upset feelings without it turning into something, with just being seen and heard and diffusing it before it turns into that big old fight or whatever. He and I have never had an actual fight. So I love that.
I find that, as you mentioned, I recently married myself and my husband and I don't fight. However, when we are agitated by something unrelated to each other, it can certainly take conversations in a different direction.
Ooh, that's a really, really, really good point. I want to hold that thought because we do need to go to commercial break. When we come back, we're going to discuss that a little bit further and kind of how, conversations can bleed from our thoughts, feelings, and emotions. We'll be back in just a moment. You should have seen me in the background, everyone. I'm just digging around on my desk trying to find something. I'm like, wait a second, it's time to come back. So if you're just joining us now, I am Julianne Meyer. You're watching Own Your Wellness, and today's awesome, amazing guest, Melissa Dileo. Welcome back to the show. We were talking about this right before the commercial break about being agitated with other things and how it can affect conversations with our loved ones. And I've noticed that too, like, oh my gosh, or even at work, sometimes if I'm irritated, it goes wherever. And it's something that's like, oh my gosh, I have to put myself in check because I know I'm being like crazy. But how do you guys deal with that?
Well, here's a great time to introduce another practice of how to get with more comfortable in conversations. I have found through my own experience that when that happens, it has been incredibly, if not powerful, at the very least influential, to go back and go, my response to this conversation was out of line with what we were talking about. It was just elevated, and I will say, this is where it came. I will own it. I will go back, whether it's with my husband, with my stepchildren, with a friend, a family member. It's happened with families, and just, own it. You know what? I was really agitated, and my response was out of line to what we were talking about. There was no connection. It wasn't you. And for my husband and I, we know each other because I would say the thing that we both know agitates us most. We both work at a computer all day. And we are not very tech savvy sometimes. And that is our number one thing that escalates our mood during the day. And if we have conversations when one of us is in that level of frustration, it doesn't go well, but we come back, we own it. Let me own my part of this. I apologize. And so the practice can be done outside then your own personal, like in the workplace, we do that. Our response is out of context for what the conversation was. And we get reactive for whatever reason. And to just go back and, I know where that came from, or yeah, that didn't make any sense for me to react that way. So I, just own it. I apologize. Let's start over.
For me, thank you for saying that, because I do that a lot. There's times I just go back and I say I was out of line, or I'm really sorry. My response had nothing to do with you. I might have been saying something accurate, but the way I said it, how it was delivered, there's some venom behind it, maybe. Just to be able to acknowledge and, like you said, own it. People are just so grateful because they can let it go, just, all it takes is you saying, gee, I see what I did there. My bad. and then try and do better.
Exactly. Yeah. And often the times that when you snap at somebody where it seems out of context, where did that come from? They're going to ruminate. Not everybody would. Some people are just like, okay, whatever. But other people might ruminate like, where did that go? Or how did this happen? And when you go back and like you said, it just takes it off the table, it deflates. And I have found that it influences how other people are. They're more willing to own it when they seem to be a little out of line with the context of a conversation or the significance of it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Another thing to watch is when people, have you ever had this? This seems like a small thing. And it's interesting, though, how it can go awry. If I asked you, Julianne, would you like pizza or Mexican food for lunch? And you said Mexican food. And I come back with, so you don't like pizza? The question wasn't whether or not you liked pizza or Mexican food. It's what did you want to eat tonight? And so that's a silly dinner time. But think about personally and professionally, how oftentimes that's where the conversation goes. It goes from I'm asking you something specific or I'm making a statement about something specific, and then that person's mind goes, or yours, to this totally different thing. And it escalates into something that was wholly unnecessary.
Exactly. And, there's something that I've noticed too, and I don't know if other people do this, but now I've gotten to the point in my life where I'm like, okay, I'm angry about something. Am I looking for a fight so I can release this anger? Am I looking for a way to let this out that's not has anything to do with this person or the situation or anything like that? But I just don't want to feel it anymore. I want to give it away.
It's a great point. I'm sure you and I are not alone in the fact that we do that.
It's fascinating when I realize I'm like, oh, wow. And, even little things. I remember one of my coaches at one point pointed something out that I thought was absolutely brilliant. And so this has to do with chewing loudly. And that happens to be one of those things that drives me bananas. Even my own chewing, like it doesn't, like if I can hear it, it's too loud.
Right.
It just drives me. I know where it came from too, but it doesn't matter. It's still there. And he didn't know this, but he was talking to a group of us, and he was talking about, people being annoyed by loud chewers. And he said, but imagine if it was somebody who couldn't eat or wasn't eating, and now all of a sudden they're eating. You would be celebrating the fact that they were chewing loudly because it meant that they were eating. And I thought that's really a great way to reframe it, because I don't want to be annoyed. It's not fun being annoyed. Why am I choosing this? And if I can reframe it, then why wouldn't I do that? So I think that's really, when it comes back down to how am I talking to myself, right?
And we tend to be, the bigger part of the conversation we put on ourselves, and then we're just reacting to what other people say. If I may share this story that kind of puts into play a couple of different practices we've talked about.
Yeah.
Years ago, back in the last election, so quite a while ago, I had a friend. I just called her out of the blue. I've known her for 20, 30 years, and I hadn't talked to her, so I was calling to just say hello. She immediately went on this rant about a conversation between her and someone I didn't know. And just on and on, it was something very political. And she was just like very heated. And I was like, wow, that I just was looking for a hello. How are you doing? And all of a sudden she stops and she goes, oh my goodness. She goes, you agree with her. And I was like, wait, whoa, what? Where's that coming from? She goes, well, you are not saying anything. And I said, that's what listening sounds like. So she started laughing and then went on and on. And so the reason I bring that up is even when you sometimes are doing something with the best, I'm listening to her. I didn't feel a need to fix it. I wasn't trying to advocate for the woman that she was frustrated with. Tell me more about, I wasn't asking questions because I didn't really want, she was giving me plenty of detail. I was just like, let her go. And it was interesting though, her knee-jerk reaction. And the reason I bring this up, and because you're like, sometimes you might just be looking for a fight, either validation. My point, that's that where you get the pylon. Yeah. Tell me I'm right. Or someone's going to start going, well, wait a minute. Are you thinking through this clearly? And then they're like, you're denying my thought process. So it's interesting. And you said it really starts with us. And what is our frame of mind in any moment when we're communicating with somebody?
Yes, I love that. I want to talk just a little bit because we're running out of time already. I know that you're writing this book. I touched on that a little bit before, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that so people can keep their eyes peeled and look for that in the near future.
Well, thank you, Julianne. Yes, it's a short book of how to practice or put into practice what you've already learned either through reading books or taking training, because oftentimes it doesn't stick. And because I teach so much and train on it, I found like there's this gap. I can't come up with any new earth-shattering new ways to communicate more effectively. However, I can realize that, and I really came across this concept when I was in Spain last year trying to learn the language and trying to immerse myself in it. And I'm like, I have to immerse myself in it daily, or I will never speak it. And I thought, this is the same thing. People come out, and research has shown that oftentimes a big chunk of training doesn't stick. So I'm like, what is something? So it's a simple book. The conversations are not uncomfortable. You are. And how to get more comfortable, or to quite frankly have conversations and you don't need to be comfortable. Just open them, because oftentimes the discomfort is in the thought beforehand and the initial words that come out of your mouth. Then when you see, wow, that wasn't so bad. That went all right. It's gone. So it might be just that first step, but I think you're more uncomfortable in the process of it. So the book is 12 practices, just little bite-sized chunks in minutes a day. And like we talked about creating habits, and to take, people who are specialists in habit creating, oftentimes it's connecting this new habit you're trying to form to something else you already do. Right. or and then eventually combining different pieces of the practices and doing more than one at a time. But it's just a really simple book on how to, if you're really invested in changing how people respond to you and how they experience you, is practicing it and minutes a day to build that confidence and comfort level. And it starts with an awareness, though, quite frankly, of the first practice is, why are you uncomfortable in the first place? Is it the topic? Is it you? Is it the person you're talking to? But a clarity on that, because before you can start solving for a problem, you have to understand what the real issue is.
I like that. You do. You have to understand what the real issue is because otherwise it's kind of like taking a pill and then, it might solve this particular thing, but it's going to pop up some other way. And yeah, it doesn't actually get solved. What was I going to say? I was going to say that, what I like about your book is that it's the bridge. It's the missing piece. It's the going from knowing to doing. It's that piece, that accountability, because a lot of people, like if they've studied and they've done all this stuff, but they don't apply it. And I mean, that's exactly why you wrote, or are you writing this? And I just think that is the piece that's missing. It's like, how are you supposed to have a paradigm shift if you don't know what a paradigm is? But how are you supposed to do that if you don't have steps to follow? Things that you can do, because it tells you, like, it doesn't tell you how to do it, like just that you need to change it. So I appreciate that very, very, very much. We literally have 1 minute left. Is there any final thoughts that you would love to share with the audience before we wrap up?
Yes, it's just, I think that there's always a great time to learn this, but I think right now, with so much divisiveness and this jumping to conclusions, making judgments and assumptions, labeling people, that just, it's that power of one. If one person is like, I'm going to take a pause before I open my mouth and speak the thoughts that are in my head. I'm going to be aware of my thoughts, use the word grace and kind of switch it. Like, let me talk to the behavior, not my judgment of this human being.
Exactly. Oh, that's beautiful. Well, Melissa, that is all the time that we have for today. I just want to say thank you for coming back and being a part of the show. I'm very excited that you're here today. I always enjoy our conversation. So thank you very much. And everyone, that is all the time that we have for the show. We will be back again next Thursday. Please join us then. And until then, enjoy the rest of your week. Bye for now.